Hi everyone, my name is Mauricio Diaz de Leon and my partner is
Chris Carey.
Hey Chris. Thank you for being here. I'm a doctoral student in the ONL, Organization and Leadership Program, and Chris is
A doctoral student as well in the International and Multicultural Education Program.
awesome. Thank you. And today we're going to talk about increasing your cultural intelligence. Just briefly, you learned a little bit about, who we are. We'll provide some guiding questions, provide a glossary of key terms, getting to some practical applications like using the 5 cultural scales, 10 skills for intercultural communication, as well as learning a relevant language and learning about the culture, the target culture, in terms of knowledge and things that we'll list out. We'll end briefly with a couple of board questions that you'll see on Canvas as well.
All right, everybody. So Mauricio just mentioned the whole chapter, which is a very, very dense chapter. We'll do our best to summarize the key points for you. But hopefully those takeaways that you'll have are how to improve your own cultural intelligence. One of the main quotes that stuck out to us is that intercultural misunderstandings are inherently problematic because by their very nature, they go unnoticed. And just as a sponge activity, as we do in our regular sessions together to start off, we have a clip from the film Mr. Baseball that we'd like to share with you. And before we share it, or while we're sharing it, we'd like you to see if you can identify what examples of intercultural misunderstandings that transpire in this 2-minute clip here. Very little spoken language is exchanged. A lot of these misunderstandings are nonverbal. But let's see how many you're able to identify.
It's polite. It's okay. Jack?
What?
Bad luck.
ちゃんとヒロコ教えてあげなさいよ。あんたの打ち方には好きがあるよ。
What did he say?
So whether it's the chopsticks or the pouring of the drinks, the protocols, and demonstrations of politeness, hopefully you could see in the video that these intercultural misunderstandings can easily go unnoticed if we don't have that cultural intelligence that we're striving for.
Thank you, Chris. And something that we would like to share are, some questions that we'd like to share are the following to help us guide the conversation, and something that we thought about while going through the readings as well. And as you can see, here the first one is, how do we weave them together to increase your cultural intelligence, meaning skill sets, ideas, etc. what practical actions can you take to become a savvier international professional to increase your cultural intelligence? What can you do about what you've done, heard about, thought about, or experienced firsthand? And this could transcend into other courses like previously mentioned.
Here we have a glossary of key terms that for many of you in the MA TESOL program or the doctoral program for IME may be familiar with, and even in your other subject matter, that we incorporate that aren't mentioned in the reading but certainly have application and relevance. This is just a glossary for you to review for your own edification of videos that delve into these topics further if you so choose to take a look at those.
Thanks, Chris. Very resourceful and good resources to use. Let's get into it. So here in the reading, we picked up a key point, which encompasses these 5 cultural scales. The following are equality versus hierarchy, direct and indirect, individual and group, task versus relationship, and risk versus caution. So these ideas also mirror some of our previous content, like the individualistic versus collectivist approach, and also alludes a little bit to the power distance, that level, specific to certain cultures versus others. And then the high versus low context levels for countries. What we get into are very general ideas, but advice also that provide a starting point to guide us towards what you want to look towards. And so these are 5 scales, again, that mirror some of our previous readings and concepts. We'll provide notes in the PowerPoint we share, but we thought we'd talk about only one of them for right now.
And then just to dovetail on that, I think one of the things that we liked about the scale analogy from the author, from Peterson, is it's a balancing act, right? And that you need to shift from one side to the other of the cultural divide, if you will, these different concepts based on the composition of the group that you're working with, and adjust accordingly. That's how we can demonstrate cultural intelligence, as we've talked about a lot in our course, is knowing our students, knowing our colleagues, knowing our counterparts, and adjusting our delivery in the way that we engage our counterparts accordingly. Just an anecdote, not discussed in the reading, but certainly relevant, that Peterson encourages us to consider is the privilege that we have as native speakers of English, not having had to learn the language, but having acquired it at a young age, and all of the intricacies and inconsistencies in its pronunciation and grammatical structures. This is Cattrew's 3 circles of English. Many of you may already be familiar with it. The inner circle being the countries that speak English as the official and only official language in the country. The outer circle, countries where English is one of the official languages, such as Paraguay, India, Nigeria. And then this ever-expanding outer circle, which outnumbers that native speaker population by 3 to 1. That you have this dominant minority of native speakers that are highly outnumbered by non-native speakers of English. So Peterson encourages us to be cognizant of that privilege, and the 10 skills that we're going to share with you here in just a moment are ways to be more empathetic, sympathetic communicators in English, so as to make ourselves more intelligible and comprehensible. So these are those 10 skills for how to interculturally communicate in English. And again, with that privilege in mind, here are things that we can do as English speakers to improve our communication with that expanding circle.
Yeah. So one of the first one, actually, like Chris said, is avoid sport and military idiomatic expressions. I think we're both guilty of using sports or soccer as one of the tools that we communicate through. So making sure that that is that's something at the forefront of what we do, and as we know, the U.S. is a low context culture. This something that we say or how we express may be taken in a different way somewhere else with another person from another country or just different region.
Yeah, I am definitely guilty of those sports analogies for sure. The second consideration for us that Peterson suggests is to keep things simple, to keep the language that we use accessible. You may want to consider who your population is. If your population resides in countries where Germanic or Latin-based languages are used, you can use a higher registered vocabulary, more calc-level vocabulary, because there's so many cognates between English and those languages. But overall, what the author suggests is to keep it comprehensible, and in doing so, the I+1 comprehensible input hypothesis from Krashen applies here, where just above or at the level of understanding is where we want to keep our communication, and also webbing and chunking.
The third skill that is encouraged by Peterson is to give and send feedback. This is, I think, very common in a lot of different settings, not only language and communication, but when learning something. So check for understanding. There's a feedback loop. Be mindful, the difference between the closed-ended versus open-ended questions, and also be cognizant of what we've learned through our other readings, nonverbal communication and cues picked up that should be picked up and should be sort of you should be looking out for as well.
Speak slowly and clearly, but not loudly. This is an example, everybody, of what not to do.
Please tell me you speak English. I'm Detective Carter. Do you speak any English? Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
So, obviously, it's okay to speak slowly and clearly, but not insultingly slow. Moreover, if you need to repeat yourself, as we'll see in the next skill, you don't need to shout or doing it in a condescending tone. So slowing the pace is sometimes necessary, so as long as it's done in a respectful manner.
And as Chris has already mentioned, repeating if necessary is one of those skills that, should be in our back pocket to help with the communication. And if needed, later on we'll talk about using examples. But again, paying attention to how you say it is very, very important as well.
Using precise language, avoiding verbal phrases, really fleshing out. I think if we assess our language, and especially the restricted code that we use at home, I think we'll find that we have a lot of, we're a low-text culture, right, here in the United States. So really flesh it out, be more explicit and thoughtful in the choice of words that we use, and use a lot more of an elaborated code to be more easily understood, and our meaning be more explicit rather than implicit.
And one of the skill sets here is to be clear, to use common gestures, to use the thumbs up, the universal, sort of okay approval, versus the other, sort of signal for okay that it may be inappropriate, for example, in South America. And again, alluding to our other readings from Gundi Kunst and the presentation by Lydia and Sammy.
Number 8, write it down, that the spoken form of the language dissipates right after it's said. However, if we make our language written as well to complement our conversation, it provides a reference that your audience can go back to, that your students can go back to, that they can study and have a better understanding of. And it's an important consideration, as most ELLs have a lot more experience and exposure to the written form of the language, and not as much conversation practice, not as much practice with the spoken form. So having the written form to accompany the spoken form is a very important consideration.
And the ninth skill is to offer examples as alluded earlier, and these are used to support an idea, and if there is restricted code, this is a way to do that. Whether, again, as you see here with the hands, that is also used and encouraged.
Oh, by the way, do you have any special skills?
Oh, yes, I do. I do voices.
What do you mean you do voices?
Well, I do voices.
Yeah! We've come to this planet looking for intelligent life. Oops, we made a mistake.
We're happy to be in America. Don't ask for a green card.
I want you in the worst way.
Well, it's certainly a rough meeting, and it's not going very well for me, I'll tell you that. Hey, boss, give it a chance. She's going to loosen up any moment. Look at me right now, Moneypenny. I want to undo that bow and get to know you.
I'm crazy to make a deal with you. Nancy and I are still looking for the other half of my head. You idiot! You're doing it! I'm sitting on a gold mine!
Don't make me smack you, sweetheart. I'll do it.
Oh, Robin Williams, the best. And the last one, everybody, the 10th skill is summarize. And the summarizing can go both ways. You can solicit from your students or from your audience a summary so that they can demonstrate understanding as a means of feedback to you, or vice versa. You can offer a summary as a means of clarifying instructions for an assignment or key concepts that you've just discussed. Peterson in the reading encourages us to consider the privilege we have as native speakers, those of us in our class that are native speakers of English, and that in addition to these 10 skills that we've just discussed with you, and hopefully there are a couple that you can personally attest to or that you would consider reflecting upon, we would also encourage you to reflect upon your studies of other languages and how it can show empathy and reciprocation by even just trying to acquire those basic phrases in that target language. The ability to view and take upon the lens of another culture, as we've learned in our course with the Sapir-Whorfian hypothesis. And then in doing this and making this reciprocal effort, we create this bridge, this bond, intercultural bond with our counterparts, which creates this solidarity. It lowers the affective filter, and as Krashen mentioned in the affective filter hypothesis, creates an environment where there's a lot more collaboration, trust, and through that, whatever the goals are, learning or business or an athletic goal, it's more achievable as a team, having that solidarity of making a common effort to learn about one another's language and culture.
Thank you, Chris. To sort of summarize a little bit, the skill sets, the circle, the 5 scales, these are things that we can sort of do within the situation. I think learning about the target country and the knowledge that could be learned beforehand is very, very important in order to then have a more culturally intelligent experience. And 4 of those things that we encourage, that we found through Peterson's suggestions, include historical overview, economic system, social structure and ethnicity, and international ethical issues. But I think ultimately is a testament to respect, respecting the communities that you will be engaging with, or the group members that you'll be engaging with. In terms of economic systems, like some important considerations are, does the community at hand or people have computer access, or what percentage of them do, that will suggest or influence your decision, whether it's business or education or entrepreneurship. endeavors. Is healthcare free? What's the gap between the rich and the poor, etc.? In terms of social structure and ethnicity, for specific countries, sometimes the church and state are inseparable. So knowing that and being at the forefront of your understanding of a certain country or region, how does that influence, your approach, your behavior? And then in terms of international ethical issues, one specific example that comes up is in American culture, we value contracts, written contracts versus in business. And outside of the U.S., it may be the opposite, where family and relationships are more valuable than the contracts and can be, overwritten. Or so we just have to be aware of those differences prior to engaging with countries or regions.
So hopefully you enjoyed us going through the presentation, some of the movie examples that augmented some of those 10 skills that we covered together. So one of your questions to consider is to think of a movie that portrays cultural knowledge, such as the knowledge that Mauricio just covered in the previous slide, of your country and culture, or one of the countries and cultures that you identify with, and identify those important bits of cultural knowledge. What cultural knowledge does the film portray, and why do you think such knowledge is important for us to know about your country and culture?
A second question that we thought about was, among the language or languages you speak, what are 6 essential phrases in addition to those proposed by Peterson? Is hello, goodbye, yes, no, please, and thank you, that you feel are important for language learners to acquire. Really looking forward to learn how to say it in other languages. Mm-hmm. And the third one is, from the storytelling perspective, recount a story or situation where you used one or a couple of the 10 skills that you use to address miscommunication or misunderstanding, and get into a description of the cultural differences, if there were any, or similarities, and as well as what was the convergence of both of those, or 3 at times, or none. We're super curious to hear more about your experiences based on these questions.
And with that, we look forward to your thoughts in the chat. We hope you enjoyed the presentation. We hope that there were a few things that you would consider to improve your cultural intelligence. And thank you so much, everybody, for indulging us in the opportunity.
Thank you again. Goodbye.